Today we are talking about team fighting. More specifically, we're talking about what you, your character, should be doing in a team fight. This is one of the requests from when I posted in the community tab, and this one is from Gabriel Mendes. He wrote, please make a video describing the job of each role in a team fight, basically what they should be doing most of the time. Are supports supposed to babysit backline or initiate? Who should the assassins, hunters and mages be focusing? Should the warrior be diving the backline or frontlining? Now obviously this is not that simple of a question to answer because a lot of things are situational and a lot of characters function differently. So what I will do is I will briefly go through the different classes and summarize those characters that benefit more from aggression or more defensive styles. I will refer mostly to Conquest here, but that doesn't mean that the information isn't applicable to other modes, just I would say to a lesser degree. For example, in many modes, positioning as a squishy is not necessarily as important as in Conquest, as many lanes don't have that many backline entrances where you could get flanked. So sometimes it's not quite the same significance for that, but overall you should get the same idea. Also, I'm going to be mentioning roles in that context. If you're not playing Conquest, you're not playing exact roles, then go by what you're building. If you're building a mage with a tank build, it's as if you were in solo lane in Conquest. If you're building a mage with a damage build, then it's like middle lane, so you get the idea. And before we begin, let me quickly preface this by saying that obviously there's always a bit of bias in this. If with a different build, a different playstyle, or in a specific situation you can make a character work differently, that's totally fine. Often you will have to flex. For example, some characters are worse at initiation than others, but if you're the only tank on your team and the only frontline on your team, then you will have to initiate anyways and blame that Loki solo for not picking a tank. So this is not cookie cutter stuff, but I will try and make it as simple as possible. In the Guardian section I created 3 different parts. We have the hard initiators, we have the pure backline peel, and we have the characters somewhere in between. The hard initiators are Ares, because he only works with aggression. If you play passive as Ares, you're basically out. Barkos, because all of his CC forces him to hard initiate. Kabrakan, because he has to be up in the enemy's face, though he can peel a little bit too. Cerberus, because all your abilities work best by being in your enemy's face and having them run away from you. And your ultimate is kind of setting up the similar way as Ares does, so you want to get in there and get that off. Kuzenbo with a bit of a question mark. He does get very good setup off by blinking in and using his ultimate to push enemies towards his team. Otherwise, he's also very decent at disruption. So maybe if you're getting aggressed on, then he also has pretty good peel with the ultimate. But overall, you want to hard initiate and pin someone down, though he may not be the best support anyways. With Sobek, you definitely want to hard initiate because everything relies on your displacement and on getting your ultimate on as many enemies as possible. With Xingqian, much like with Ares or with Cerberus, you also want to hard initiate because of the ultimate. And with Ymir, you also want to hard initiate because of that high aggression he has, though he's also decent-ish at peeling. The more in-between characters are often those that have decent CC of some sort, but also have some other utility. The first one is Ardio. She brings some healing to the table, she has decent single target peel, and her stun is also good but not the best. You can go in very aggressive, but often you're better off like somewhere in between and seeing what opportunity arises for you. With Athena, you often have to all in as you really need to get that CC off through the taunt, and afterwards you don't really do that much in a team fight anyways. But the peel that you can provide later with cooldown reduction and by coming back with the ultimate too means that she can kind of flex a little bit. With Fafnir you can definitely flex too. He has some decent multi-target CC and some decent single-target CC. He can kind of disrupt enemies with disarms, but he can also go into the enemies and then zone them off with the ultimate. So a lot of tools there. With Ganesh, I would say he's more towards the backline peel, but it's still an in-between character because his ultimate is still a good engage. It's often that Ganesh doesn't really have to run in himself like others and can hold onto the dash until he really needs it and the knock-up, but his ultimate is something he can place towards the enemies anyways, so nice benefit for him. Gap obviously is one of those hard initiators in terms of his blink ult combo, but at the same time he's an excellent character at saving the backline too due to his shields and due to his disruption of various sorts. So really also a situational thing, though if you can find the hard engage at the start of the fight, you should do it. Kumbhakana, again, somebody who can be played in multiple ways. For example, if you have a lot of high burst characters, you can blink and mez everyone and that can set up for a Poseidon Kraken, but in other situations you can't do that and you're just better off going for a more safe route and peeling off for your team. Sylvanas also has the hard blink ult engage, but he also has nice backline peel. He can pull enemies away, he can root them, and he can heal. Terra is in a similar situation, also has the root, has heals, but also has, you know, a big root that can hit the entire team. And she also has that big ultimate which can be used both offensively and defensively, so very flexible. For backline peel, I only have Capri here, who is very much not an initiator as long as anyone else on the team can initiate, as he can only get that one single target abduct pull that makes everything else not usable for him for the duration, and he's got that small root which has a delay, so it's really not that great for him. With warriors we have a similar picture, but there's a major difference. I don't think there's any warrior that's primarily focused on backline peel. Many warriors can do both, they can do hard initiation and they can do backline peel when the situation requires it, but many of them are more revolving around a more aggressive playstyle and none of them is purely focused on backline peel. Also, I separated between hard initiators and initiators/bullies here, as they are the hard initiators which focus on getting in, getting their abilities off, see if they can catch off a kill, and if they can't, they get out. And the bullies are those that are actively looking to trade, especially the enemy ADC, the one that have basic attacks that of their own that have a decent amount of damage, the ones that will stick to the enemies for an extended period of time and constantly beat down on them, even when their abilities are down. The hard initiators I have are Kukulin, should be very obvious, goes in, uses his kit, hopefully goes berserk, uses his kit even more and then probably gets a kill or gets out. Hercules, because half of his kit is about pushing enemies into his team or in a better position for him to beat down on them. Then Odin, who will definitely just look for the hard initiation to get his cage off in one way or another. Sun Wukong, who has a massive amounts of disruption for the enemy backline, can bully a little bit too obviously, but once again relies more on abilities than basic attacks. And then Tyr, who kind of does the same thing. The best thing you can do with Tyr usually is blink into the enemy team and just push them into your team. The first in-between character is Achilles. He has a very easy time cleaning up targets for his teammates that surround them if he defends them, but his engage is also not completely terrible. His setup with his stun is still pretty good. Amaterasu, who can do a lot for her team in terms of auras and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time also has a very strong ultimate for setting up a lot if she has to engage with it. Then we have Chak, who is also very good at both setting up kills with his ultimate as well as disrupting enemies that are trying to chase in the backline through his strong slow. Guan Yu, who has a very strong engage into the enemy team, definitely a very strong setup, but at the same time is also very good at helping his teammates through his heals and through the shred for them, so he can also peel for the backline very well. And Nike, who with her ultimate can literally do either, and her whole kit with a disarm and everything revolves around being very flexible anyways. The initiators/bullies are those that have a good engage, but then also probably beat down on the enemies with their basic attacks. This is definitely Bellona, who has a very good setup with the ultimate and then has a disarm and all that kind of stuff. You have Erlang Shen, who's just excellent at trading in general, but also has some good setup with the turtle. You have Osiris, who will probably look to ult in the backline often or get in from the side and then try to CC some enemies for his team while beating down on them. Raven, who's just all about that diving ultimate and then slapping someone in the face. And Vamana, who, while he doesn't have the best CC out there overall, will be very good at going into the backline and then just going big baby and stomping down on everyone. For the hunters, I don't really think a separation has to be made. All hunters should be more about positioning safely and getting their basics off while taking as little damage as possible. There are different nuances when it comes to the level of safety they need to take. For example, a Skadi without mobility has to be a fair bit more careful than a Hachiman with multiple mobility abilities, but overall they all follow a similar concept. There are some gods that can kind of vary a little bit in their playstyle, where for example Ullr can try to get more single target picks, while someone like Hou Yi is a lot more teamfight oriented overall, but it doesn't really change much about the position. Be around the backline, be in a position where your tanks can help you, be relatively close to the mage ideally, so if someone engages on you, you have another character with burst who can like take down a target together with you, though obviously not too close so you don't get hit by the same abilities, and that's pretty much all you need to keep in mind as a hunter. With your traditional mage ADCs, Kronos, Freya and Sol, the same thing applies. You want to have the safe positioning that allows you to get your basic attacks off. Now, for most other mages, the story isn't much different. Your place also should be towards the backline, close to the tanks, but not too far away so you can still get your abilities off. The biggest difference to the ADCs is that you are a little bit more flexible in your range because most of your damage is not coming from basic attacks, but rather from abilities instead. As such, you can drop certain abilities and then increase your distance for a while to get into more safety while that ability is already going off for you. Think, for example, a Nox Silence. The exceptions to the rules here are Ao Kwang, who will look for a backline engage as he plays a lot more like an assassin, and that's all you want to do with Ao Kwang, you just want to look for picks. Then obviously the more tanky mages like Hades and Shongkui, who with the right build, especially if played solo but also in mid if they have a tankier build, can look for more frontline action. That's just something that's more suited towards them because that's how they get their damage off, so obviously you can't just hang around in the backline. You have those extra protections, so go ahead and use them. The same thing also somewhat applies for Chang'e, who has to be a little bit closer and typically doesn't build full damage either or can heal herself up at least, and Aphrodite when she has to be close to her allies in order to keep the link up. Some other mages, namely Habois, Nox and Ragin, will also search a little bit more closeness to the enemies sometimes just to get their abilities off better, and because they usually can punish enemies that engage on them directly either through CC or through such high amounts of damage that many enemies will simply back off. And then there's also the outlier of Janos, who can kind of play a little more aggressively and a little bit more erratic overall, as he has that mobility through walls, so your positioning should be closer to walls than other characters, as you can kind of make outplays with that and also bait enemies in. Something that's worth keeping in mind for Chernobog as well, by the way. With the Morrigan, you often want to play a little more like an assassin. You want to stealth into the backline, get your 2-in-1 off, and then transform and play however that character you're turning into plays. And with Thoth, you can obviously have a little bit more distance than everyone else, as his kit is very effective at very long range. Now, assassins obviously generally want to be in the enemy's face. There's no assassin that's really looking to peel primarily. But there are different niches in that regard in how much an assassin will engage. I separated this into 4 categories. All-in characters that are really just looking to use their kit and kill as many people as possible, and if they don't do that, they probably didn't do their job or just didn't succeed in that teamfight at least. The dive and poke characters that can go all in but also have means of poking the enemies before that if that doesn't work out and have tools to do more in a drawn out team fight. The disrupt ones who will probably not go too deep into the enemy backline unless they have a specific target there that they can take out, but rather look for picks that their team can then pick off as well along with them. And the isolate ones that have means of displacement primarily or other ways to single out one enemy for their team. The all-in characters are very self-explanatory. Arachne, Bakasura, Kali, Loki, Naja and Thanatos. All of these characters benefit a lot from going in and dealing a lot of damage and trying to kill someone, because that way they get heals again, or that's their only way of surviving, or they have nothing to do afterwards anyways. Then the dive poke characters, where you could theoretically put Thanatos as well depending on how you want to play him, are Bastet, Camazotz, Mercury and Ratatoskr. Bastet can long range poke, or she can jump in, drop her whole kit and jump out. Camazotz can do multiple ways of long range poke, but he can also all in with his ultimate and just take someone down or multiple targets down. Mercury can go all in with his ult or can use that to disrupt as well a little bit, but he also has means of poking with his one, and he's also very well off going in for a bit, taking someone down and then backing out a little bit and going back in when there's a new opportunity. Ratatoskr also goes in very hard with his ultimate quite often, but then also benefits from using his abilities, getting out and looking to get back in, find another opening. Likewise, Susano has this way of using 1 or 2 of his abilities, and because he's so mobile, he can quickly get out and quickly get back in. The disrupt gods are Hun'Batz, Serket and Thor. Hun'Batz, because his ultimate is a massive teamfight disruption, should be self-explanatory anyways. Serket, because while she isolates a target, she also creates a lot of disruption to the teamfight in general. She will often be the primary target once she shows up, and she also shifts the teamfight dynamic that way. So she could kind of go into isolate as well, but I think she is a very good character as disrupting with multiple CCs in her kit. Thor, should be obvious too, has that big engage with his ultimate, but also has a little bit of long range poke and also has that wall that can really change the dynamic of a teamfight. The isolating characters are Willish, Daji, Fenrir and Nemesis. 3 of them are self-explanatory. You get that ultimate CC off and you displace someone entirely and put them into misery. With Nemesis, it's a little bit different as you don't displace the enemy directly, but you isolate them in the way that you take away a lot of their protections, deal a lot of damage to them immediately, and your team will probably focus on that target if they're smart, because that target will take extra damage. That is it for this overview. I know, again, a lot of this is somewhat biased or somewhat my personal opinion, so I'm sure you will find plenty of things where you disagree on the playstyle, and that's absolutely fine, but I hope this was interesting and insightful nonetheless. If you're new to the channel, click the sub button and the bell, it really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow, and probably be a double upload again. DukeSloth, out.